Hello, welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. This is our New Year Christmas edition. Happy New Year, Happy Christmas to everyone. Today the tables have turned and Walter from Brainfeed, who joined us in our conspiracy theory episode, is going to turn the tables and he'll be asking all the questions today. So please settle back and listen to a bit of a different episode than normal. Walter will be administering some conspiracy therapy, and I do need a bit of therapy at the moment, suffering from a bit of a cold, but never mind.
Alrighty, viewers, thank you for checking out this show, Conspiracy Therapy. On this episode, we're talking to Scott. Scott is the host of the podcast Truth Sentinel with Scott, which can be found on his website, which is www.truthsentinel.co.uk, as well as his YouTube channels, Truth Sentinel 1 and Truth Sentinel 2. If you go onto YouTube and you type in Truth Sentinel with Scott, you'll be able to see his YouTube channels, and please subscribe and check out his work. Truth Sentinel is a news, commentary, conspiracy broadcast discussion program that looks for the truth hidden deep within the mainstream news. A relaxed, informal chat show with news, reviews, and discussions with guests. Topics include population control, loss of personal freedoms, global elite, missing planes, financial collapse, World War III, and much more. Like I said, the episodes can be all found on YouTube and his website. So the reasons why I wanted to have Scott on the show is because this past year we collaborated on one of his True Sentinel episodes where we discussed the nature of conspiracy theories, the grand conspiracy, and if they're important to reality and understanding our world. And I had a lot of fun getting involved with that episode, and I felt like the guys over at True Sentinel, Scott, they took a very creative approach to things, and they had us discuss like various clips. They gave us I think about 5 clips, and we discussed it. We listened to it. So I thought that was interesting and creative approach. And also, being on his show inspired me to get involved and start doing this show, really. So I want to thank him for that. Also, I know that, Scott, you do a lot of traveling, so I'm interested in how that impacts your show and your perception of the world and reality. And finally, I've noticed that your show is pretty unique because it covers some topics that even the alternative media doesn't really cover sometimes, and you're all over the place. So I think that's pretty cool because you're exposing people that may come to your show for one topic, and you're exposing them to a variety of other topics that they may have never been led to. So right off the bat, I want to thank you, Scott, for agreeing to do this interview with me. And let's get started.
Yeah, thanks, Walter. It's nice to be on your show, and it was great to have you on our show, and it's very good to be on yours, and nice to speak to you again.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get right into it. What got you started looking into conspiracies and researching, alternative views of reality, and also what led you to the creation of your show, Truth Sentinel?
Okay, well, I've always been interested in conspiracies, mysteries. Like a lot of people, really, from a young age, really. I used to go down the library and read Chariots of the Gods by von Daniken. Read about the Bermuda Triangle, Holy Blood, Holy Grail. I used to read all those kind of books. I was interested in mysterious and alternative kind of things anyway. And I used to listen to and read books by a guy that some people may not be aware of, called Barry Smith. He was an Australian guy, sort of the Australian Alex Jones, I suppose. And he wrote books about, a lot of the organisations that people, listen to these days and read about. Some of the big elite organisations, the Illuminati, and he was sort of delving into some of the religious aspects as well, like the Antichrist, and I was just interested in that kind of stuff. And I was also, when I was younger, sort of in my 20s, I was interested in sort of finding out what life's all about, and is there any explanation for it all? And I actually went on an expedition to Turkey, East Turkey, and climbed Mount Ararat in Turkey looking for Noah's Ark, because I'd read books about that as well, that some people had found this thing on top of the mountain covered in snow, and I just wanted to. I was looking for something, basically, something to prove why we're here, what it's all about, and I'm still looking, really, and that's one of the themes of the show, is just looking for the answers to some of the questions in life. Some of the reasons why I do the show, there's a number of reasons, really. One thing is I travel a lot. I've always traveled a lot, even from when I was in my 20s. I like exploring new cultures. I like moving around. And when you do that, you tend to come across some of the big events that happen in the world. Like I was in Thailand, in Phuket, where I am now actually, during the tsunami. The tsunami that killed sort of more than 250,000 people. And I arrived actually that day, the day about 5 or 6 hours before the tsunami came. So that taught me a lot about fate as well. I was also used to live in Fukushima, so that was before the accident there. Um, I went to Hiroshima, I went to New York and saw where the towers had been. I lived in Ukraine, and I was there when some of the troubles were going on, and they're still ongoing, although it's sort of out of the news at the moment. Thailand, yeah, lots of places. I went to Egypt, and we did a show on the pyramids and the mysteries of the pyramids. So one of the reasons I do the show is because I travel a lot. But also there was the more practical reasons that I was uploading videos for another host, and I got quite a few subscribers, and then I had to stop doing that. So I thought, well, maybe I should give this a try myself. Try doing one of these shows. I was making teaching videos anyway, so I knew some of the practical ways to make podcasts. Another reason I think is I don't know if you'd agree, but with all the things that are going on in the world, sometimes it's just good therapy. It's nice to have a voice. It's good to be able to talk about these things and to feel that some other people are listening, and maybe people that agree with you or even disagree with you. But just to have a voice is a kind of therapy for me. So those are some of the reasons why I do it. Basically, is to have a voice, and sometimes I just feel like I have to talk about some of the things that are going on in the world, the injustice, the problems with government. Some of these things make me angry, and I feel like I want to talk about them. So I guess those are the main reasons.
That's awesome, man. Like, especially that last reason there really resonates with me, because I agree with you. Like, being able to do podcasts and talk to other people that even if you share 50%, you're in 50% agreement with what they say. I mean, it really helps you to feel a lot more confident about things, and just kind of relieves that stress a bit of like feeling alone at times, right? And then also, it's a great way of getting, like you said, a little bit of anger out, because, it allows you to focus and funnel your energy and your anger into something hopefully positive, something that may be able to inspire others to do something inspiring in their lives as well. So, I mean, I guess I want to talk about traveling more, because I didn't realize how much of a traveler you were, really. I knew you traveled a little bit, and you always say, oh, I'm over here and I'm over here, and I'm like, wow, this guy's all over the place. So I want to say, so how has really traveling impact your show and your perception of humanity, and like when you're dealing with people, and maybe even get into how people in other countries like perceive conspiracy theories, or perceive even like the actions of Western nations, if you have any experience with that.
Yeah, well, I think traveling does affect, anyone who travels, it does affect you. In positive ways, sometimes in negative ways, but I think if like for example, before I went to Japan, I knew a little bit about Japan, but it's only when you go to a country, and especially when you spend time with the people in that country, that you start to see people more as people. I know that sounds a bit strange, but I think there's a perception, from some people who haven't been to, say, Japan. It's kind of, they haven't really got any Japanese friends, and they can't really associate or put an image or a picture to a Japanese person and a personality. And I think what it does do is, if you travel a lot, I think it makes you empathize more with different cultures, and if something happens, if an event happens in another country, like in Japan, say there's something like Fukushima, well, there's a direct connection there. I mean, I used to live in Fukushima, and when that tragedy happened over there, and I started to hear about all the people that were dying, well, some of those people would be people I've met. Daiichi School, so a lot of children from Daiichi School were killed during the Fukushima disaster, and they used to visit my school where I used to work near Fukushima. So it made it more personal. I think that's what happens with travel. Things become more personal. You have opinions that like in Hiroshima as well. When I went to Hiroshima, I met a survivor of the bomb there, and there are certain things and certain opinions that are really affected when you meet somebody who was directly affected, and it really affected me meeting this lady who was young at the time when the atomic bomb went off, and she told me about how her brother was vaporized, and she was still shaking, obviously traumatized from the events that day, and she was like, I can't remember exactly how old, but she must have been, over 60, 70, I don't know, but she was still traumatized, and the things she said really made me think, nuclear weapons. It really changed my opinion on nuclear weapons. It made me think these things need to be got rid of, not just, let's cut down, or they need to be destroyed and got rid of, and this needs to be done as soon as possible. It made me have stronger opinions about that thing. But as to conspiracy theories and how people feel in different countries, well, I think the cultures really do affect how people think about conspiracy theories. I've found in some countries people don't really talk about conspiracy theories so much. They're not such a big subject. But I also think that I can't really comment too much because to really understand a culture, you have to spend years and years there. So I know that Anthony, one of the other hosts of Truth Sentinel, he says, for example, in Turkey that a lot of people there believe in conspiracy theories, or they certainly do believe in things like apocalyptic events. I mean, I was in Istanbul maybe a few months ago, and I was speaking to a guy that I met at breakfast, and he was talking about ISIS, and he was talking about his religious beliefs and how he's prepared to die, and he believes all these apocalyptic events that come in due to what he's read in the Quran. And I think that's another thing about traveling. You meet so many different people, and they spread their ideas, and you start to see how people think in different countries, and people think quite differently. In Japan, the mentality, for example, is just completely different to the way that people think in the West, and it taught me a lot. Sometimes I found it difficult. Sometimes I felt like these people are crazy. But after a while, I realized, just because I've grown up thinking this way, thinking in a certain way, that's down to my culture and my upbringing. And it does make you adjust sometimes, even if it's not totally changing to agree with another person's point of view. It makes you adjust slightly and then and understand other people's point of view. And I really honestly think that as part of the education system, I know it happens to a certain extent. I really believe that travel, where practical, should be a part of the education system and meet in different cultures, because it can actually also eliminate things like racism.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like traveling, based on your experience, allowed you to grow a stronger connection with like your fellow man. And I get that a lot from a lot of people, right? They go to a different place and they learn about a culture or whatever, and they build these connections, right, with each other and humanity. And I think that's something to be said. Like it's more important than ever nowadays, especially with the rise in like terrorism and the ideas of terrorism and the fear of those who are different from you. I mean, we really need to work on building those connections so that we can, communicate and come together and work on something together, and really overcome that whole hate and fear of each other, right? So how do you think, like what's your opinion on ISIS and all that? Because I know you brought them up, and I think you did a recent episode about it.
Yeah, we did do a recent episode about it. I think I think it's really difficult. I've listened to other shows, and one thing I've found in the alternative media is there seems to be a lot of people like who feel like they have to give the answers, like they have to say, well, ISIS are definitely this, and they were created, they're completely a scam, they're created by the West, and I do think there's a certain amount of truth in that, but I listen to some people who think they're an authority on the subject, and I'm just not so sure, to be honest. I think it's quite confusing, where they've come from. I feel like it is connected to the Syria, the events in Syria. When there was the chemical weapons allegation, and the West tried to get public opinion behind the idea of going to war in Syria, and the public weren't really buying it, and you could see that they were kind of Obama and John Kerry were kind of disappointed, and Cameron, and so they had to come up with something else, and then lo and behold, ISIS crops up, and it does seem to be slightly a government created and media created event, but as to where as to where this creation and the truth lies, sometimes I just don't know. Some people have said in the alternative media that these videos of beheadings are fake. Well, some of those people I don't actually think have watched these videos. I've watched some of them and they look pretty damn real to me. So yeah, I am, I don't mind sort of letting people know that I don't know the answers, and sometimes I'm as confused as everybody else, and I think we need to be able to do that as well, not pretend we've got all the answers. But as to ISIS, well, there's definitely some media. The media do what they always do, which is spread fear, make something larger than it might be. I mean, most people when they step back and think about it, the chances of you getting killed by a terrorist really are very, very low. And that needs to, people need to remind themselves of that. And that really is a fact. You are more likely to be killed in a car crash, or even actually, if you look at the odds, you're more likely to actually die from being stung by a bumblebee than being killed by a terrorist. So people need to bear that in mind. Let's not get overexcited here, about ISIS, but it's being used as a tool. That's my opinion. As to what the end game is, well, seems to be war, and I do have a hunch they want a big war. They want World War III. I just think there's a lot of money in it for them, and it seems to me, if you look at their actions, if I was a government leader, I'd be doing anything I could to prevent war. But when you hear some of the things that Obama says, for example, it just seems like, or some of the things that Turkey do, like blowing a Russian jet out of the sky, they don't seem to be as cautious as they really should be.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the presidential debates right now in the U.S., I mean, almost all the presidents or the candidates across the board are all for, attacking ISIS and being strong against ISIS and this and that, and it looks like no matter what, the U.S. is just going to get another warmonger, another president will be too willing to put their young people into combat over more areas over in the Middle East, which we know that that's kind of falls right into their agenda and stuff, because a lot of like there was a general, I forgot now his name, but general back in 2003, right before they attacked Iraq, and he was saying that there was plans to attack all over the Middle East. So I mean, I think it goes right into their agenda to continue this whole hate and continue the attacks against ISIS and stuff. And I think something that's also important, maybe you can talk about this, is the idea of labeling and how labels are just thrown around on the mainstream media to get certain reactions out of people. They've taken ISIS and then they've equated it with Muslims, right? And now they're just persuading the population to maybe take drastic steps, like with policy and stuff. Like have you seen any impact of this whole fear of ISIS where you've been traveling, and how do you think that's impacting the general population?
I guess, to be honest, I see it more on the media rather than I do actually in meeting people. Apart from the guy I met in Turkey, who he brought it up straight away because we were in Turkey, and the Russian jet had just been shot down that day, literally. But generally, I see it more on the media than I do, actually talking to people on the street. Well, because I'm in Phuket at the moment, to be honest, most people are just here to relax and have fun and forget about everything. But I see it on things like Fox and CNN and BBC. It's the media that are actually spreading this. I mean, if you took away switched off all the televisions, and didn't look at the news sites, you wouldn't think of the amount of fear that would suddenly disappear. People wouldn't know about ISIS, and to be honest, they're a tiny threat. It kind of, if you actually think about it, sit down and think about it, it's kind of ridiculous that we're all getting so scared about it all. It's silly. I would guarantee, I'd put I'd put £1 million down that you're never going to be involved in a terrorist incident, and probably everyone listening as well. It's kind of silly.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if you look at, like you brought up, the amount of deaths compared to, from terrorist attacks or whatever, compared to, something like car crashes or cancer or alcoholism or something like that. I mean, it's you can't even compare the two, right? But then you don't have political leaders, whether they be in the U.S. or Canada or whatever, you don't have them running on a platform of, hey, we need to get everyone healthy because too many of us are dying of cancer or some other diseases, or you know what I mean? Like it's just all focused on the fear of some sort of different culture.
Just a quick advert break. Our email is scottsentinel9@gmail.com. Check out our past episodes. We've got lots of interesting guests, and you can find us on YouTube on 2 channels. We talk about conspiracies, mysteries, injustices, corruption, religion, war, peace. You can leave your own message and we can base our show around what you think. That's what we intend to do. Help us find the truth in the news. Find our YouTube channels. We've got all the episodes on there. Truth Sentinel and Truth Sentinel 1. Subscribe to both so you get notified of everything. Click on the About section, you'll find all the links. Have you got something you'd like to advertise? If it's truth related, honest and ethical, get in contact. You can help us, we can help you. We sell our own t-shirts with "The greatest enemy of truth is blind belief in authority" on the back. Just $20 plus postage and packing. Let us know your size, just send us an email, we can sort it out. We've also teamed up with trutht-shirts.com, and they make political t-shirts. Let people know where you stand, basically. Use the code TRUTH1, you get a 10% discount, and we get a donation. They make all kinds of political t-shirts, and they can customize them for you as well. If you've got any ideas for publicity stunts, get in contact. We need to escalate this channel, make it much bigger. We need your help. Please support us. Thank you.
Coming into your country, I mean, what are your thoughts on what's going on with the refugee and crisis and the policy surrounding that? Have you followed any of that?
Yeah, actually, our last episode was kind of on ISIS and the refugee crisis, and we interviewed a lady called Gabriela Andrievska, who works in one of the refugee camps in Macedonia. And whilst I can understand people's concern, about the potential of terrorists using the refugee situation to cross over borders, I think that's also a very small threat as well. Most of these people are fleeing Syria because they want their children to live, and they're actually putting their lives at risk on these boats to escape the country, as everybody else would do. If you're in that situation, and these people are literally going to school and bombs are dropping alongside their schools. They can't live in that situation, so they're escaping basically. And I would say if you don't want refugees coming into your country, or other people from another country coming into your country, then stop voting for these crazy world leaders that are causing all these wars, because a lot of these things could have been resolved years ago. If you had people in control of countries that actually wanted to bring about world peace, and that's what we want. Most people on the street want world peace. They don't want people taking part in wars, but these government leaders actually do want that. I really do think they do. They generally don't care about people, and they have agendas, and they have military contracts to be signed, and that you can't really have military organizations within your country without any wars. They need to keep them busy. They need to keep selling arms to other countries, and that's kind of disgusting, really. Every time they sell missiles, weapons, there's only really one thing that those are going to be used for, and that's for killing people. And I just think the refugees aren't the problem, immigrants aren't the problem, and homeless people aren't the problem. People need to identify who are the problem, and for me, it's the people, unfortunately, at the top. We can talk about later maybe what's the solution, and maybe we shouldn't always just focus blame and just criticize, but it's hard not to criticize some of these people because they don't have our best interests at heart. And if we could change them, if we could put people in power that did want to create a bit more of a utopian world, I really do believe it's possible. I believe we could have world peace. I think we need to take control of the media, basically, because I think that's one of the most powerful things is the media. It actually controls people's opinions. If you speak to a lot of people on the street and ask them a question about politics or about some world event, you could probably trace back their answer to some article they've read or some TV program they've seen. Unfortunately, we're all just victims of what we know from the media, and until we can change that, I think we're going to have these situations.
Yeah, I agree again with almost everything you said there. Especially here in Canada, you can see from our political leaders that the idea of getting into Syria and attacking Syria is just pretty strong. The propaganda is strong, and especially in the States. And I'm not sure about the UK because I don't really follow their politics as much in their mainstream media. But in Canada and the US, I mean, most of the the political leaders, if you're not for attacking ISIS in Syria, if you're not for really developing and really going after these terrorists and stuff like that, you get scrutinized. Like there's a whole section of them that just that just go right after you if you show any type of sympathy to these people over in Syria. It's pretty incredible. And along those lines, I guess I wanted to get your opinion, and I know I kind of put you on the hot seat here, and it's kind of controversial when it comes to like the truth movement and stuff, but what are your thoughts on like the whole individualism or isolation of nations versus like kind of coming together and the whole collective ideas? Because when you're talking about world peace and coming together and working out differences and stuff, a lot of people on the fringe, especially in the conspiracy or the truth movement and stuff, really kind of go on their tippy toes and they're kind of like listening because they're kind of scared of that collectivism, right? I mean, a lot of it gets equated with communism. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but feel free to share them.
One of the problems, I think, in the world is patriotism. I hate to say it, and I know there's going to be a lot of people who say, well, I love my country. And I would say, well, why? Why do you love your country? It's a landmass, really. It's just a landmass, and, of course, all our countries have histories and we have cultures. But, as John Lennon sang in the song Imagine, we could maybe dream of a future where there was no borders, and people actually just thought about people on the planet Earth as just a citizen of the Earth. And maybe I know there would be things that would be lost. You could say that we would lose. Our cultures might become diluted if we just got rid of all the borders. And I know there would be problems, and I know there would be loss. But think how much would be gained if we got rid of all the borders and we started to think of ourselves as not part of a team, part of our own country, but part of an international collective. I don't really think of myself. I come from England. I couldn't care less if someone took away my nationality and said I was Canadian, or took it away and said I was Thai. I couldn't care less, to be honest. And I hear people talking about their country and being very patriotic. Well, that can be used against you. That could be used to control you. That can be used to drive you towards killing people from another country. Patriotism can be dangerous. That's all I'm saying. I think in the States, when I look at Fox News, the amount of things that I see that subtle hints and control mechanisms in the way people speak, using patriotism and love of the military, thank you for your service and everything. It's like, this is all just, some of these things are just props to make people want to go to war and want to fight and want to kill people from another country who they don't even know. And if they actually met these people, sat down and had dinner with them, they've got an awful lot in common. There's no need for this. I think most of these wars are not to protect your country. They're not. There are other agendas. The people in control have other agendas. It's nothing to do with the agenda they're spreading about in the media to, save the citizens of your country, or to fight for our freedoms. What freedoms? Some of these freedoms are being eroded. If you look at Guantanamo Bay, some of these people are being released from Guantanamo Bay, and they're coming out, and you can tell these guys are not evil people. They've been incarcerated for many years without trial. What kind of freedom is that? I just think people need to start thinking about perhaps changing their perceptions and thinking about why do you love your country? Why are you so patriotic? There's a lot of brainwashing going on. That's all I'm saying. I don't know how you feel about that.
Oh, I agree, man. I think that it goes back to the whole divide and conquer. I mean, as long as they can keep dividing us up, you can have a small group of elite, whether they be between, 1,000 and 50,000 people working together and to completely enslave humanity, 7 billion people. And as long as they have us all divided up and, nitpicking at each other's differences, whether it be different ideas and criticizing, not in a constructive manner, each other and what we're doing, and looking at each other rather than looking in a mirror for answers, then we're easy pickings. They can do whatever they want with us. And I think that's really the next step for humanity, is figuring that part out and saying, hey, we really need to work together, and no one's perfect. We all have our own problems. No country is perfect. Every country out there has, a history of, something that could be said is, bad or corrupt or not innocent. No one's innocent, right? So once we can, that's one common ground. No one's innocent. No one's perfect. We have to find common grounds and build on them so that we can take it back, because as you say, these guys, these control freaks on top, and there is a group of them out there, and I'm hoping that the listeners of the show already are kind of have a little bit of information on it. But there's a group of control freaks out there that just want to enslave, and they've got no conscience. They don't care about us. The interest is wealth and power. And there's other interests that we probably don't even know about, but besides the point. So, maybe this is a good segue into your thoughts about what is their end game. Like, where do you see the ruling elite leading us? What do you think their ultimate goal is?
That is a tricky question. I'm not sure what their ultimate goal is. Some people might say, if you link it to religions, some people might be looking for the apocalypse, Armageddon, and the end game is to get all countries fighting against each other and cutting down the population, that eugenics, creating a society where there's a lot less people to control with the elites. The eugenics movement basically was, taking the most intelligent people and who the elite believe they are, but actually, a lot of them they've just gone to private schools, or because they've had more money, so they just know a few more facts in some cases. But eugenics could be the end game. There's the Georgia Guidestones. I don't know what some people think about that. It's slightly disturbing. They want to cut down the Earth's population by not more than 90%. That could be the end game. But I think the one theme is control. They want to control everybody. They don't want people to be free thinkers. I do think the education system kind of tries to make people think in a certain way and rewards people for obeying and complying, and I think that's what they want. They want people to obey and comply, and they want a society where they have total control. But as to they could have much darker end game than I know about. I wouldn't claim to know. But what do you think? What do you think their end game is?
I think it's along those lines. I think there's a integration of technology. I think we're going to see kind of like a Borg kind of thing happening where people start integrating and having things implanted in them, and then it'll be a lot easier to control them that way. A lot of it is just maintaining status quo of a materialistic kind of world, worshiping the money, worship of goods, rather than working together. And for sure, more division. Just like narcissistic people that just want to nitpick at each other, and to your face will be all deceitful and charismatic, and try to get you to do one thing or another, and then behind your back they'll be talking crap about you or whatever. That type of mentality, I see that type of humans growing that way, developing that way, becoming very narcissistic and manipulative, and then also integration with technology while they do like the slow kill kind of depopulation agenda that they've been doing for a very long time anyways.
Yeah, I mean, we had I did one interview with Valery Spiridonov, who is aiming to be the first human to have a head transplant. And so I can kind of see the dangers of some of the advancements in technology, and changing people into Borgs as well. But at the same time, I can see some of the benefits. And I think it's almost inevitable. I mean, someone like Valery Spiridonov, for example, he's got a disease, and he's predicted to die at a young age. And so for him, this could be a way of extending his life and advancing medical technology as well. So I can kind of see it from both sides, but I think it is inevitable. But I think people need to be careful, with some of the things that are going to happen in the medical world. I think it's going to get pretty scary in the next sort of 50 to 100 years, some of the things that we're going to be capable of.
Yeah, certainly, and I agree with you. I think it's like anything really. It's like a tool. Technology is a tool. The government is a tool. A gun is a tool. A hammer is a tool. These things can be used for good and evil, for building something or destroying something, right? So keeping that in mind, like we can use technology, like you said, to do wonderful things in the planet. Maybe get free energy out there, clean some water up, provide clean fuels and stuff like all these utopian type of ideas is totally achievable. Unfortunately, like we discussed, like we were discussing, we've got people in control that it doesn't work into their best interest to release technologies like that because it'll take control from them. Right? If you've got countries or people that have free energy or have clean energy and this and that, then you're not relying on the government to implement some sort of environmental policy. You're not relying on them to bring in dirty fuels or this or that, right? So it's about a lot of it's about control. I think like if we were able to come together and really get some of that technology released and remember our humanity, keep in mind our humanity, keep in mind our connection to the planet, then technology can be used for some wonderful things, right?
Yeah, it could, for sure. Even technology costs money. Who controls the money? Well, it's these people again, unfortunately. So it is exasperating sometimes because, I see that the world has a lot of potential, to bring in some clean energy and to bring in improvements for the good of humanity. But to do that, you need to have the people that control the finances to be people with good morals, really. And unfortunately, we don't seem to have that at the moment. I hate to be negative, I do want to look for positive answers, but I think one of the things we do need is for some of the wider general public to start to realise that, to realise you can be positive by identifying the problems. You can say, look, once we all start realizing these people in charge are the problem, that if we change them and we put in people who had better morals, then we could start creating a more utopian world. And I just think a lot of people are just content with their if they can go to sleep at night, if they can have a roof over their head, and they've got children to look after and things like that, then why do they need to bother with any of these other things? Well, I just feel like people have accepted the fact this is the world we live in, and there's corruption, there's injustice, but that goes on. That's always going to go on, and I just think no, it doesn't have to, and people have children. Well, what about creating a better future for your children? What about really taking this seriously and changing the structure of society, changing governments? You could even argue. I do think I'm becoming a bit more of an anarchist, actually. If someone gave me the option of having no governments whatsoever tomorrow, there probably would be some problems with that, but I would take that over the current system personally.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm on the verge of kind of the anarchistic idea. I think that and I'm going to be doing future videos about this and hopefully getting other guests on about this idea that I really think that an anarchistic kind of society, there needs to be a transition into that. It can't be just get rid of the government, get rid of the rules, and then hope for the best, because I think people are not ready for that. The general population, mentally, they're not ready for something like that. And also physically, they don't have the supplies, they don't have the skills to survive and all that. I mean, it would be a messy thing. Whereas if we had good people in government that slowly transitioned us over to a more anarchistic kind of society, I could totally see something like that working. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I do think, I try to think of things on a smaller scale, like, the population of the world. Like, you could just boil it down to sort of 10 people in a room. Could you get them to all agree on something, or to agree on a structured society? And the answer, I think, would be probably not. People have different opinions about everything, and I think that we should just accept that, And I think so. What the answer might be that we don't all create our own utopian society together, but that maybe, people break off into groups and create the society they want, and people should be allowed to do that. I think that people aren't allowed to do that at the moment. Like, if you try and set up some kind of utopian society, you're going to be subject to the laws of the land, basically. Whereas I think you should be able to opt out and say, look, this is our land. We own it because, well, why not? We're citizens of the earth too. And these are the laws we want to live under. This is the society we want to create. We want this guy in charge, not you. Well, I think people should be allowed to opt out of the current society. And I think if we were able to do that, then people could start creating these societies. Of course, there's going to be problems, but I think it would be nice just to start trying to create these alternative societies as an experiment, and to see what works and what doesn't work, maybe.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the question I was going to ask, and then you were kind of answering it already before I asked, but the idea of, like, what do you believe are some of the greatest challenges humanity faces? And you brought up the idea of, like, kind of apathy, right? And people just kind of going with it. So do you think that's the greatest challenge, or like what are the greatest challenges in your eyes to having a society that's more free?
As I said, part of the problem is people holding on to their countries and their cultures and thinking that their countries are better than other countries. I think that's one of the problems. People need to let go of that, because if you think about it, what you're literally saying is, you could walk up to someone from another country and say to them to their face, my country is better than yours. And I think people need to seriously question that and think, is it really? Why? What is it that's better about my country then? And would I really go up to someone in a room and say, I'm better than you? I think that's, people start to need to become more humble and to realise that, to be honest, there are some things about some countries that are more convenient or slightly nicer, but you can't really say the countries as a whole are better than other countries. Japan, there's a lot of criticisms I could say about Japanese culture, but they have some great things too. And on balance, I'd say they've got some good things going on. I wouldn't say my country's better than theirs. So I think that's one of the things. The other thing is, I think we need to get rid of the potential to destroy mankind, and I'm talking about nuclear weapons in particular. I think if you're going to have nuclear weapons, you've got to be prepared that one day we're all going to kill each other. Because, as I said, the people in charge don't have our best interests at heart. They're not the kind of people that sit down thinking, I will try everything, I will 100% will make sure that we never destroy another country. These are the kind of people that like playing games and could take us to the brink of nuclear war. It's happened before in the past, and I would predict unless we get rid of nuclear weapons, a nuclear war is going to happen. Millions of people are going to be killed. I would say it's 100% inevitable. And all it takes is for someone like Obama, instead of promising in an election campaign to get rid of them, another person who's actually a decent person to actually do it and to take a risk and say, I know where, in some people might criticize us, but we're going to lead by example and get rid of all of them. So you don't need to have yours. You can get rid of them, all of them too, Actually do it. Just get rid of them. They're not necessary. I think another problem that humanity faces is isolating other countries and not dealing with problems and mocking other countries. And I'm talking about North Korea here. It's like they've just become the joke of the world. I think of things in a playground mentality. You're talking about a dangerous kid in the corner of a playground there, who people are just laughing at, and who he's very secretive. Nobody knows what's going on. I would say this has been going on way too long. People should be opening their arms to that metaphorical child and welcoming him into the international community, and removing the threat. If we carry on allowing countries like North Korea to actually get away with what they do as well, I would say arrest the leaders of North Korea. Say this is unacceptable. We can't have you treating your citizens like this, assuming they are. We get a lot of propaganda as well. But I would say, and I would say that about a lot of other countries as well. Arrest the world leaders. Arrest them and saying this is unacceptable. We should have an international court. We're supposed to have one, But they let all these kind of criminal events go on. North Korea is going to be a problem unless it's dealt with. And I think, they're just allowing these things to fester. And one day, it's going to end in disaster. And I think if we tackled these things now and demanded, whilst we still have these world leaders, demand something's done about it.
Yeah, absolutely. You see a lot of atrocities happening right across the board, like even in Saudi Arabia or different places in Africa, and the sickest part about it is the fact that we got NATO countries and countries like the US and stuff selling, and even the UK selling these countries arms, selling them weapons to do the awful things that they do to their own people, right? And it's just another prime piece of example to show everyone that the people that are in control of politics right now do not have our interest, right?
Yeah, indeed. What goes on in Saudi? I saw an interview with David Cameron the other day, and the interviewer was asking him about this young guy that was going to be crucified or something, and it was being brought up as a crime, and what's he going to do about it? And he was going to be doing very little, it seemed, and he was being pushed on it, and he was saying, well, we need the Saudis. They give us a lot of information, but I would say, yeah, as you alluded to, that no, it's not information they give you, it's money. It's a lot of money they give you, and they're turning a blind eye to a lot of atrocities. Some of the things you've been seeing ISIS doing, well, it happens every day in Saudi, and
exactly.
It should be unacceptable. My own opinion on the death penalty and executions is we should be stopping that as well. If you think about what goes on in some countries such as America, with the death penalty there, that's pretty barbaric too. There's nothing good about that. People have to question, if it's wrong to kill, then why is it okay to execute people, even by lethal ejection or the electric chair? It's pretty barbaric as well. These kind of things belong, 100 years ago. I think it's time we all grew up. Society grew up.
Yeah, people are just like holding on to that traditional value, that whole conservative value. And I'm not a liberal or a conservative or anything like that. I'm trying to find balance here. And I think it's important for us as humanity, to find a compromise in between. But, the death penalty for sure, because like if you look at the stats and stuff, like how many wrongly accused and wrongly convicted people have there been that have been killed? And there's quite a few, like there's a good portion. And, one's too many, really. And like you said, it's very barbaric. It's like medieval times. Were we still living in medieval times? Like, it's time for us to evolve, right?
I was just going to mention 2 Burmese people were sentenced to death in Thailand today, and I would put I'd put a fair amount of money that those two guys are innocent. I mean, the Thai police don't have a particular dislike to Burmese immigrants. These two guys have almost certainly been framed. They've used forensic evidence to frame them, and they're going to be sentenced to death. And I don't think this is just something that happens in places like Thailand. I think it happens in other countries as well. Police are under a lot of pressure to find the culprits of crimes. Actually, in this case in Thailand, a lot of people think actually the police are protecting the local mafia, but these two people are sentenced to death now. They've been tortured, confessions tortured out of them, and forensic evidence has been used. And actually, we're going to be doing an episode soon showing how forensic evidence is not quite as watertight as people have been led to believe. It's been shown that a lot of these forensic science is actually slightly dubious, and that it could be used against anyone really to make them look guilty when they're innocent. And I think there is a lot of cases of injustice and people being executed, both in countries where you'd expect it to be happening and probably in countries where I think people think in the West that we're all squeaky clean and that it's just other countries where this things happens, but I don't think it is personally.
Well, that episode is interesting. It sounds very interesting. So I'm going to be keeping my eye out to listen to that. What are your thoughts on like political movements? I mean, you've traveled around the world. I'm sure you've had experience with seeing the local political movements and how they've evolved or developed or whatever, or their impact on the location. So, what are your thoughts on like organizations and political movements, and how can they benefit us, or what are the negatives? More local community stuff.
You mean things like We Are Change and stuff like that?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Like We Are Change, and maybe stuff that like the local community comes together, maybe even the smaller scale stuff, whether it be a community comes together to fight against like local crime, or come together and build like a community garden or that type of stuff. Like how is your experience with that going in your travels?
I think it's a good thing, basically. I do think it's a good thing. People should maybe lower their expectations. I think, especially if you try and take part in the current system, like if you try and form a political party or a political organization and then try and compete in the existing system, I'm not very optimistic you'll get very far, because I think the system itself is geared towards making anyone who should succeed not succeed, and I think part of that is the media again. But I do totally 100 support any activists or groups like Anonymous, for example. I think a lot of stuff they do is great. Anyone who's trying to fight evil or criminals or injustice in any way, I totally support. But I would say, well, have a look at the system you're fighting in. Is it possible to win? Is there going to be is there any chance you're going to be successful? If it's you're fighting against some particular specific case, say a court case, and you've formed a group to help raise awareness of a subject, then that's great. It's all good. I do totally support them, but I think in the long run we need to try and dismantle the system itself and try and maybe construct a new one. I've heard some people in the alternative media totally slating activists and people who are campaigning or protesting, and I just think that's a very lazy attitude. You just criticizing groups who are trying to do something. I think it's great, but it depends what you're trying to do. I think people need to also be careful, when you get people like those anti-abortionists killing doctors. I mean, there's somewhere along the line their logical reasoning has gone slightly astray, and I think that's another thing we did an episode was on logical thinking, logical fallacies, and I think that's really important, is for people to think logically, not get swayed too much by emotions, and not actually find yourself doing something violent. If your original aims were to be non-violent and you find yourself, taking part in violence, then you've gone astray a bit. So I just think people need to be careful. On a completely different matter, and just to wind things down, when I look at other people sometimes going about their lives, watching soap operas, watching Strictly Come Dancing or X Factor. I'm not totally criticising some of these shows. I've even been a victim to actually watching one of these shows occasionally. I just feel like there's a lot of people just don't seem to care about what life is about, and in some ways maybe they're the lucky ones. I just feel like I find myself sometimes stopping and just thinking what is going on. What about you? Do you ever sort of think about what it's all about?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I'm in total agreement with you, which is awesome because I get to have these guests on, and most of the time I agree with everything they say. There's too few people really exploring the depth of reality and the depth of their minds, right? It's just like their exploration, it just, channel surfing. That's what it is. And it's just so sad to see, especially when you've got a world that's so, I guess, mysterious, right? There's so much to uncover. There's so much information that is freely at our disposal, whether it be on the internet or out in the environment, out in nature. And then there's so much information that's been hidden from us by the powers that be that we can, go and do a detective work and try to figure out. There's so much to learn and grow as a conscious being. And like you say, sometimes it can become overwhelming and stuff, but that's part of growing, right? I mean, that whole stress and anxiety, that's part of growing and learning from that and building that muscle in your head, right? I mean, it's like when you're working out or whatever, your muscles hurt, right? You feel that pain, but the pain is the gain, right? And unfortunately, so many people want to opt out to that pain. They don't want to push their limits when it comes to understanding or looking at reality. Thank you again for spending this hour and a bit with me, and I want to urge any viewers out there that's listening to this to go check out the Truth Sentinel, which is truthsentinel.co.uk. That's their website, and then you can Google Truth Sentinel with Scott, and you can find their 2 YouTube channels, and they've got a whole bunch of episodes, and they cover a variety of different topics, and it's awesome to be able to speak to people like yourself, Scott, that has the experience, that has the knowledge and has done the research and isn't like, a narcissistic about it and open to like speaking openly and it doesn't seem like you've got a secret agenda.
It's nice of I think it's nice of you, Walter, to invite us onto your show as well. It's not a competition, basically. We're not competing with anyone. It's good that you're trying to reach out to different groups.
Thank you again, Scott, and I do look forward to talking to you in the future. We should do this more often. I agree. So have a good day.
Yeah, you too, Walter. Thanks very much. Take it easy.
You're welcome. So I want to invite everyone to go to my website, Brainfeed.ca, my YouTube channel, Brainfeed.ca, as well as the other website I got set up, which is Brainfeed.tv, where I host a whole bunch of different researchers and presenters and great videos, informational stuff there. So check out all that, and thank you for listening to Conspiracy Therapy.